Hello, seekers. Welcome to another episode of Wildly Tarot Podcast. I am here today with a new friend, Erica Wiederlight, who is a sexual empowerment and dating coach. And we are going to dive into a juicy discussion of the star card and how this archetype makes itself known in her work and with her clients. I'm really excited to dive into this topic. So, welcome, Erica. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Even like you talking about the star, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. We're gonna have so much fun.
I know it's one of the most fun cards. It has just such a light and juicy air about it. Definitely.
It's so true. I know at first I was thinking of another card, and now that, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I'm like, ooh, like just the energy of hearing about the star. I'm like, I'm so excited to have time to, spend with this energy today.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, so let's begin and let me know, how are you feeling today? Mind, body, heart, and soul.
Oh, that's such a good question. Good. Good. I was, a little bit crunchy this morning, to be completely transparent. And I did a movement class, which really helped me integrate all of it because I was like, ugh, like I really feeling crunchy, and that really helped. And briefly, what I'm going through, and if the listeners can resonate, it's a lesson. It's like a life lesson, but it's not in a pretty box, if that makes sense. And I'm very attracted to, let's learn the lesson in love and light. You know what I mean? Like, let me get it with a box and a bow. And this is not a cute one. And I'm already grateful. I'm like, I needed to learn this, but it's not cute. And it's crunchy and it's sticky and it's gross to look at. So this morning I was like, ugh, but it was good to move that. And honestly, being here talking about the star, it helps the cause because it gets me out of the swamp. You know what I mean? Like it's like, all right, let's focus here now.
Yeah, and yet we need the swamp sometimes. It really
Yes.
define us. Yeah, totally. I can totally, and I use that word crunchy all the time. That is definitely how it feels sometimes when we're in these healing spaces and really taking the time to egoically look at ourselves and sort of ferret out the places that are just not in alignment anymore.
Yeah, it does feel, it's like crunchy really is the perfect word because you're like, ugh, like, so, and like you said, we need it because it's not always rainbows and butterflies as much as we'd wish, but sometimes we have to go through the mud. And I'm grateful that I have practices to help me get through the mud, like that itself is like a huge gratitude.
Yeah, and I love how you wove in embodiment there. It sounded like you've really tapped into when we get into these bodies, that's when we can get out of the mind space a little bit and really be more present.
Yes, and this is a sidebar, but what's so funny is, so it's a 2-hour class, and you do your thing, and at the end you dance, and you really are not supposed to be performative. And at the beginning of class, because I was swampy, I picked a very I'm grieving, sad song, and this was when I was in my head, and I was like, I can't wait. But then I started, like, I was like, I can't wait to be so, swampy and in the shadow. I was like, great. I'm so excited. And then by like out when, our teacher started to play the song, I was like, I'm not in the mood, because by then I moved it, I processed it. And that's, the beauty of the body and the mind. My mind was like, I want a grief, I want a dark song. And my body was like, yeah, I actually moved through that pretty quickly. Like, I'm actually ready to like be in a different energy. So that's what's so cool about, and I think what's so important about being in the body, right? It's like it processes differently than our brain. And I think that's so powerful.
That sounds so much like my personal 5 rhythms practice.
Yes, I love it. Oh my God, yes.
I'm curious now, how does working with the body influence your work with sexual empowerment and dating?
I mean, everything. Because we could talk about it until we're blue in the face, but, especially with the sexual empowerment piece, we could talk about it and talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, but it's, the client has to feel safe enough, I should say, to drop into their body to feel pleasure, or to just feel, if you just feel, like I can feel this touch, I can feel this scratch, I can really taste my food, I can really hear the music, you know what I mean? So it's all about feeling safe enough to drop into the body. And that's so much of my work. And the confidence part too. You know what I mean? Like, yes, mindset is so helpful and it's a big part of my work, and it's revolutionary. And and also being in the body is where you could really show up with the confidence. So embodiment is a huge part of my particular work, my particular sector of work. I really think it's so important.
Yeah, well, we've led right into that. Can you describe a little bit what your work is? What is
Totally.
particular?
Yeah. So sexual empowerment and dating coach, and helping clients. Usually what I do is, 6 to 12 month containers. And I work with people, helping them feel embodied, feel confident, ready to date a partner, partners, themselves. Really, it's kind of that's why thing is so funny, because I'm like, oh my God, when with the star card, I'm like, my work is the star card. I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh. Because they come in and tap into the natural essence of who they always were.
Mm.
And I think that's what I mean, for me, that's my interpretation of the star, is like the highest self, like diamond type energy, like highest self, diamond, creative energy, and holding these people, these humans in a container where that was always who they were. So getting back to that original essence and feeling confident and safe to embody that and live their life in that way.
Mm, mm. And how do you apply these principles to this idea of dating? I'm really curious. How do you bridge that safety piece and that confidence piece with regards to finding that special someone?
Yeah, I think this is also the confidence piece. Having the confidence, being embodied, pleasure. Because so many people come in, they're like, I don't want, like, I really want a partnership. I really want partners, but I hate dating. So it's our work to find it fun, to make it pleasurable, to make it safe, to have boundaries. So it's funny, a lot of the work really actually starts with the confidence, the sexual empowerment, the star energy, if you will. And then, like you said, it can bridge into, okay, how am I going to add someone else to the equation? How am I going to feel safe to say no if someone's being a jerk at the table? You know what I mean? Like, or someone's like, great, and I feel safe enough to show myself and really be seen. So my work, I really like to start, like I said, with that foundation of confidence, empowerment, pleasure, and then we can more easily, I should say, bridge the gap to the dating world.
Gotcha. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, what I'm hearing you say is that sexual empowerment has nothing to do with the other person. It's really about being fully in our own container and finding our own pleasure. And if someone's lucky enough to share that with us, then that's great. But that's not like the main goal of your work. Is that true?
You like so hit the nail on the head. I'm like, wait, I need to write that down. I'm like, wait, that's exactly right. Because that's like, I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. Because, you know, so many people come in and then they're as they should be, but through breakups and stuff, they're devastated because their whole life is gone now,
Mm.
including their joy, their pleasure, their fun. So our work is this sounds so stereotypical and silly, but like live your best life. You know what I mean? But get them to like live their best life, have them have a really delicious relationship to pleasure, both sensual, but also in life, so that they don't feel ripped. God forbid if something happens. You know what I mean? So it's like you hit the nail. You said it so eloquently. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And that's for everyone that comes in the door, really having them have their own relationship to themselves. And if someone comes along, fabulous, and they could share their truth. They could share what they could like. It's with someone else, it's an expansion. It's not the whole kit and caboodle, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, and that is so star energy. Star is all about hope and inspiration and really being our shining selves and connecting, as you stated earlier, to your highest self and being the fullness of your being without necessarily being in relationship to another. So I really appreciate this map that you're setting out here of find what makes you happy, become a whole person yourself before you even begin inviting in these other vibrations of people who, I'm also curious your thoughts on the more that you do this for yourself and open yourself up, that really changes the quality of people that you begin to invite in and magnetize. Would you say that's true as well?
100%. 100% because you know, you're not taking stuff that is out of alignment.
Mm,
Or, you're like, "Oh, this, I wish this person so well, but it doesn't resonate with me." So I really that's why this work I think is so important because A, for yourself, you're like, "Oh my God." You know what I mean? Like I've changed so much. I get to enjoy my life so much. What I always say, and again, this is so funny that we picked the star, is people start to feel fully alive.
mm, mm.
And, that's the great things. That's like really stopping and smelling the roses. But as we talked earlier, that's being in the swamp too. And sometimes you need to give a disclaimer to clients. They're like, "Excuse me," like 3 months in, they're like, "I didn't expect this, why?" And I'm like, "I'm so sorry to tell you, like, you're coming alive to all of it, all of the above." Um, but yeah, so it's really the work of coming alive to all of it. And then, you could, like you said, adding other and inviting other energies to play with that feel in alignment.
Yes, that is such truth. That what I notice in my own clients is that most people live in this very narrow bandwidth that has been conditioned through our educational systems and our work systems and so forth. And when you start to step out of that and you increase the bandwidth, you get a lot more bliss, but you dive into all the stuff that you maybe have been numbing with television and food and alcohol and all the things. It's definitely an adventure when you step into this work.
It sure is. And again, like I truly sometimes, not all the time. Some people, don't even, but sometimes if you're really doing this big, big work, like you said, it comes up because you don't want to numb anymore. You don't, like you said, you don't want to numb with food. You don't want to numb with TV. You're like, it's painful, but I want to be here. I want to be fully alive. And I don't think this work is and that's no judgment, no shade on anyone, but it's not for the faint of heart,
Right.
and I think that, and then not to get to on a whole tangent, but like I think so, the coaching industry really briefly, I think it's so beautiful because there's so many different containers and spaces. But for me, I have no interest in doing just like I don't want to do surface stuff. Like I could tell you don't either. You know what I mean? Like I want to hold people and like, let's do it, like let's really deeply transform and heal and do the damn thing. I don't have any, and there's no shade. If you're doing surface thing, if people are doing surface, chef's kiss, there's a space for that. That's beautiful. I just don't have an interest in it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a rich experience that maybe not all souls are into in this lifetime, and that's
Right. They might be like, no. And I'm like, all right, that's great. That's no problem at all. Yeah.
yeah. I'm feeling called now. I'm curious, how does your work relate if your client comes and perhaps they're coming with a background of trauma? How do you work with someone who maybe has some pretty heavy baggage that's keeping them from being in their bodies?
Totally. Yeah, that's a big question because it's easy to say, pleasure and five senses. And it's like, well, that's great for only a handful of people. Like you said, like most people do come in the door with trauma. And I have been like I do have, some certifications around trauma and I know how to hold space, but I do recommend most people if they come in, they're like, "Erica, to see a therapist or in addition, some extra goods to make them feel safe." And I
Mm,
also, it's not my job to push. It's my job to hold exquisite space. So if we're going at turtle's pace, that's fabulous. It's my job to hold a really, 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 really safe space. And as I said, I have some qualifications and certifications to make people feel, you know, really good. And again, sometimes they're like, "This is great. Also might add therapy or some other things on top of it." So they feel really held. Cause like, if there is trauma, it's really hard to then just jump into the body or jump into some of these exercises.
right, right. So let's say someone's never done any of this kind of work before. What might they expect in the first session when they come and sit with you? What would that kind of look and feel like? Because I imagine some people might hear sexual empowerment and think, I don't know if I'm brave enough for that kind of an experience.
It's true. And also sometimes I have to like, how do I say this? Everyone comes in the door with one thing and they usually get something else, or they get that and something else.
Mm.
So some people walk in with no, 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 just dating, just dating, just dating. I'm like, no problem. And of course, throughout the thing, they're like, oh, okay, this is happening as well. Like this other thing, this star energy is secretly happening underneath the surface. They're like, damn it, I thought I wasn't gonna get this. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is like part of the work. Like, I'm sorry to tell you. But yeah, it is intimidating, but that's why I don't rush. I'm not like first 60-minute call, let's go right. It's a slow burn. And then when we start burning, we start burning. Once the candle is lit, the candle's lit. But it's a slow burn because I don't want to burn out anyone's, no pun intended, nervous system.
Right.
Like it's like, okay, let's like make sure this space is safe and you feel good. And my work happens to be very what's the word? We connect regularly. So I talk to my clients once a week, whether it be a session or check-in or texting or Marco Polo. So I'm like, let's slow burn. So they feel like, but the first few things are pleasure and safety and confidence. So I don't go to like sexual empowerment just yet. I mean, I know that's part of it, but we go to the softer stuff first, and we layer and layer and layer.
Yeah. And what would you say to someone who really has no idea what brings them pleasure anymore?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because most people I'm like, okay, so, and they're like, excuse me, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like most people are like, what are you talking about? And I'll give an example. One of my clients, actually it's so funny, it was coming from money empowerment. And I was like, just do this, just do this. And he was like, no, 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 please. Like I don't want to. I don't want to. I'm like, just do it. Just like if you feel called, like just do it. And he's like, all right. He was a good student. He's like, I'll do it. And I gave him this exercise, and it's actually coined from one of my teachers. Her name is Regina Thomas-Schauer. It's called pleasure research. And so what I do is I tell my clients to put on their investigator hat. No pressure. And I'm like, I want you to put on your investigator hat, your detective cap, like, get out the magnifier and glass and just check it out. And that means, what foods have you never tried? What music, pretend, oh, I love classic rock. What would it feel like to really, for 5 minutes, really listen in your body to R&B? Does it jive with you? Is it a no? Is it a yes? All of the above. And so an example for me, this is a silly example, but I hated sushi for years. Like hated. I was like, it's a hard, and everyone's like, she's so annoying because we can't go to a sushi restaurant with this girl. And I'm like, I'm sorry. But I did this exercise and I was like, I'm going to enjoy myself. And now I love sushi. And it also goes the other way, like things that I loved, right? Like things I would always eat, or music I would always listen to. When I really got present, I was like, oh, this is so weird. It's actually no for me. It's actually no. And the example is my friend, my friend that's a client, he did the exercise and he's like, you're not going to believe it. This I like, this I didn't, and I said, just put on your investigator hat. If you find one thing this week, that's great. And he put on his investigator hat and he's like, you're not going to believe this. Sounds so dumb, but I found all this like food at Trader Joe's and I made these specialty drinks and this and that. And he's like, is that stupid? I'm like, no, that's great, because in the past, the deal, we go on autopilot. And it's like, you go on autopilot, you do what you have to do, every day you have a turkey sandwich at lunch, and, like people, we just get so regimented. And through this, it's like, that could still happen. I'm not totally asking you to blow your life open, but on a Tuesday, maybe, can you try a little bit of a different snack? Can you listen to a little bit of a different podcast on your way to work? Can you try a different route driving home from work? Like a more scenic route, if you will. So yeah, it sounds like, oh, that's nothing. And then when you put on your investigator hat, you're like, oh, this could actually, you're essentially living life or operating life through like a child-like lens. I mean, and being, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, or that's cool, but I have no interest, and instead of I'm on autopilot, I have to do this today, I'm shut down, I'm closed down, and I have my blinders on. It kind of just opens you up and expands, has that more expansive energy.
Yeah. Oh, that's so star energy right there. That
Right?
energy. Yeah, and I love that because it sounds like such a simple exercise that people could begin slowly with if they're not used to. I'm picturing like my grandmother, bless her, how she lived her life. Everything every day was the same, and like there
Yep.
were these routines and rules that looking back now, I can see she created for a sense of safety in her nervous system. And,
Yes.
and I see that a lot in my clients that because of past trauma or just discomfort with the way the world is, we rob ourselves of our pleasure in exchange for having these neat little boxes, but they don't allow us to really experience life as we could.
That's so exactly it. And that's the thing. Like, I don't want to blow anyone's nervous system by being like, tomorrow you're going to start new, every day. Cause that's like, what? So I say, like, you can keep, 90, you can keep 100% if you want, but you can keep 90% if you want, 99%. But if you add one day, I'm going to listen to a different song, or one day this week, I'm going to try a different food, or it's little sprinklings. And I think it's a nice reminder of like, oh, I'm alive. Oh, I have a choice. Oh, but it's not total, like you said, not totally blowing you out of the water.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that little nugget. I hope that supports the listeners.
Of course.
I am curious. Most people get into the type of work that we get into because of a personal story. Do you have anything personally that you'd be open to sharing with the listeners as to how you started in this work and how your life has affected the way that you show up as a coach?
Yeah. Well, what's so funny is, and I don't know if we talked about this, I don't know if you know this, but I actually was, and I still am, an actress,
Mm,
which is so funny, of course, like the star. And so I had no interest my whole life. I had no interest. I was like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Like, again, the blinders on.
yeah.
It was like, this is a non-negotiable. And then around 2014, just a very come to your knees, come to Jesus, swampy year, deaths, um, going through personal things, like eating disorder, all of the things came up.
Mm,
And I was like, doing the acting thing, doing my thing, the part-time job, just like, okay. And I slowly started doing more holistic. And I always loved, I always had a practice of like yoga, meditation, but I slowly started to invest a little bit more into this. And actually my mom was diagnosed with cancer
mm,
at that during that period. And I said, let me give holistic options. So I started studying Reiki and different food and vitamins. And you know the deal. It's like once you start, like once you pop the fun don't stop. It's like literally it just keeps going. And I was like, and I looked back and I'm like, wait, why do I have a coaching certification? Like what happened? Like because and then this class to this class, and it was no intention of a business. It was no, 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 I'm being an actress. This stuff is all just a hobby. And and I'd have people come to my house, to my apartment. I'd be like, let me give you free Reiki, let me give you classes, let me do this. And I was like, oh no, this is turning into a business. And I'm so sad. Like I was excited, but I'm like, oh no, what's happening? And so I was like, oh my God, this is happening before my eyes. And so that was happening. And I was doing traditional life coaching for years. It was fabulous. And also sometimes people can't hear you when you're a tradition, because they're like, what the hell is that? I'm like, I could change your life. They're like, no, like, what does that mean? So that's how I actually pivoted and went into this more specific arena
mm.
because I struggled here. And I was so interested in this area. And then, like I said, I trained really intensely and exclusively with some of these like awesome teachers. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This is it. This is, and I would, if, I mean, I think 6 years ago, I've been like, what? Like, what are you talking about? This is what, like, it's still boggles my mind, but it happened kind of really, really organically, actually. And like, I'm still shocked. I'm like, what's happening? This is crazy. This is my life.
Isn't that beautiful when we get to those places where we're on our knees and if we allow great mystery to lead us, we kind of follow the breadcrumbs and things start to align and we find out, oh, this is our place in space and time. This is where we're meant to be doing our work.
It's so shocking. Like,
Hmm.
so I would have never in a million years expected this.
Yeah. What's the most uncomfortable thing for you about being a sexual empowerment and dating coach?
I mean, being seen in that,
Ah,
I think, because first of all, in my own personal, how should I say this? For some people, it's I have to be okay with people are going to judge
yeah.
because like I have to be like, okay, like Erica, that's not your business. Like you have to step back. I think being seen in it, the people that I love and I know, like that's awesome. They're supportive, but I mean, like, it's the one that kills me the most. I think is like, what do people from high school think? Some of them I still talk to, and they're, but like, I'm like, oh my god, like that's the one. And I'm like, oh god, like that really just
Oh,
burns the most. Like it just is a light sizzle. I'm like, oh, like this is, and being seen is tricky too because again with the life coaching, it wasn't of course it's triggering being seen and putting your services out there. It's a business but this is a whole nother level of like content and talking about like this is not just like change your life. Like that's hard enough. This is very like woo! Like I have to be okay with I feel like I'm living out my like past life as a witch. I'm like, let me just keep trying like persecuting myself every day. But like I'm putting myself at the stake. Like I feel that energy and no one has been horrible, but you get what I'm saying. It's that like that like anticipation energy.
I totally feel you. For me, it's family of origin, and that always gets my flame head lit
Yep.
in that way. And it's a challenge, and it's so funny. Like, I feel like I bring magic and medicine, and you bring pleasure. Like, why are these things so taboo in our culture? And the only thing I can think of is because it gives people freedom and empowerment. And why would that be a bad thing? I can't figure it out.
It's a real, and that shows, I think that's like when we get down on ourselves or when we're like, oh, I'm scared. It's like, that's more reason for us to progress. Cause it's
Yeah.
like, oh, people need this if they're that shook by it. Like, like if it's that reaction, it's like, wow, then we are needed, our voices are needed, us very much involved doing the work, and even listeners that may have a traditional job at a bank but loves speaking about magic and pleasure, like you're needed too, like your voice, your energy is so needed too. And as much as it's a scary energy, I think that's how it's waves of change are going to happen.
Yes, when we can finally step out of these shame cycles and social pressuring for everyone to be the same person, that's
Right.
when we can all really begin to flourish in this life.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah.
Mm, mm. I'm curious from your framework, what does the star card archetype, what does it look like and feel like and taste like and smell like? Can you describe her for me?
Yes, I think for me, for me personally, it almost feels like my highest self.
Mm,
One of the archetypes, because I'm a believer, I play with like lots of different archetypes. So I have like my inner money queen, I have my inner rock star, I have my, pleasure queen. So I play with a lot of different archetypes, but she's definitely at the seat of the table, or at the head of the table there. She just feels so integrous. She feels energetically clean, if that makes sense. Like she's just clean. She feels like she has her boundaries. She sparkles. She feels inclusive. Um, I know we talked about it's funny. I was dead set. I was like, I want to talk about the Empress. I want to talk about the Empress. And now I'm like, that is so incorrect. I love like all the love for the Empress, but I'm like, no, that's so incorrect. And it's so funny because I'm like, my business is the Empress. My business is the Empress. And yet, yes, there is shades of that, but I'm like, oh, she's the star. She's like so the star. Because I remember even in the beginning when I was writing my, who are the people you're trying to attract for your business, and what's your mission? And I was like, I want people to remember that they're sparkly. And sometimes through life, like, life knocks us down and we get dusty and we get, I just and I said my job is to help them stand up and just, if they want, get the dust off and remember they're sparkly. And now I'm like, this is so funny that this happened to be like, I was like, no, not the star. Now I'm like, oh, she wanted to come through. So I'm just laughing at that whole, she's like, no, here I am. And I've been with you this whole time. So,
Oh,
and
that's
she's
awesome.
playful and flirty too. That's why I'm like, you can't make this stuff up. You know what I mean? Like especially the sensual, pleasure, playful, like, that whole energy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just, she's so there.
Yeah, yeah. What do you like best about the star archetype?
Ooh, I think the play. I think the play, it feels like a gentle invitation to rise,
Mm,
where some of the other ones, the other cards, maybe a little bit harsher, and that's okay. There's always a time and space for that, but they might be like, it's time to rise, or like, it's time to show up. And she feels a little bit more flirty. Like,
mm,
come on. Like, she feels a little bit like it's time to rise, but like, she's a little bit more like flirty and playful. And you want to rise. You want to play with her. You want to, like, it just feels flirty and inviting and safe.
mm, mhm.
And that's so funny because I'm like, oh, that is my business. Though sometimes I am tough love and I am like, come on, guys, like I have that more like boom, have to bring that like mother, Gaia energy. Most of the time it's like, teasing and flirting, and that is a big piece of the puzzle. So I think it's like a safe invitation and a
Mm,
playful invitation.
yeah. Mm. I'm curious, what about the star do you not like or makes you uncomfortable?
I think that she's so seen.
Mm,
And for me, she's the again, not always, but sometimes she could be like the sparkliest of the of the crew. And that's fabulous. But sometimes when you're like, I don't want to, like it's like it's very, like in your face. Um, and yeah, I think that's the blessing and the curse of it.
mm,
It's like, oh, I'm seen and here I am. And, and then also it's like, ugh, like you have to, it's like, you know, being seen then, like we talked about, like for the high school people, like this is what I do on Facebook, like that. Yeah, I think that is definitely, that's a challenge. And for me, sometimes, and not all the time, but keeping her grounded.
ah, yes.
Yeah, because I could be like, woo, like she can kind of like do her thing, which is fabulous. But it's like, whoa, like sparkly, here I am. And it's like, okay, okay, yes. And like, come back a little bit. So I think it's like, you live your life, you be sparkly, you dance. And also, like, there needs to be a breath and some grounding, at least with my personal experience.
Beautiful. I'm curious if you can share with the listeners, do you have any personal practices to help you when you feel so exposed and so seen and the mind starts to get in the way? How do you tend your heart so that you can continue showing up in those times?
Yeah, I think it's again the safety in the body. So it's also grounding. It's telling myself I'm okay. Maybe it's stroking my arm. It's really self-soothing. So it's like, you're okay, you're okay, you're okay. Uh, so a lot of self-soothing. And it's also like what we talked about, reminding myself why I love this. And reminding myself of of the mission of like, you really, okay, people might, make snickering comments, but look at what you're doing. Look all the people that you're helping. And I think that always gets me back. And also not to get like obsessed with the BS. Like, did people comment on the thing? Did people, like, no, you went out, you said the thing, and you don't like let it go, So I think there's a few layers to protection and safety in this.
Oh, yeah. And there's something I'm hearing you speak too. There's something about just building trust with your community. Like you have to show up quite a bit before people perhaps feel safe posting on something that you've written that maybe feels a little scary or taboo.
Totally. And
Mhm.
it's also it's my job, like, to keep showing up. I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. You know what I mean? Like I may be we ebb and flow. We're very cyclical, and sometimes sometimes I am in the star energy just because of my like moon cycle or whatever. So I'm like, yes, let's talk about it. Let's do it. And then sometimes I'm like, I really rather not. You know what I mean? So it's like finding that balance of like, but I also want people to feel safe because I don't want to be like, I'm only posting, I'm only showing up in star energy. And then when I'm going through something, I disappear. Like that feels really unsafe for people. They're like, oh my God, can this person hold me?
Right.
So that's something I have to regulate myself to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like even when you're in the star, sure, but even when you're in the other spaces, that's a big thing as well.
Mm, mm, mm. I'm curious, what is the most uncomfortable topic that you have engaged in on social media and your other platforms so far?
Yeah, well, I don't know if this is kind of a yes and a sub, but the bravest thing, because I have a Facebook group, and if anyone wants to join, they're welcome to. It's a community, and that I'm more like whatever because everyone actively is in the group. Instagram, I'm more like okay, again, everyone knows what they're kind of signing up for. But my personal Facebook page, again, that's the people from high school. That's like makes me sweat a little bit. And I've been trying to challenge myself, just not everything, but post a little bit more there. And some of the things, again, within the sexual empowerment thing, I'm like, just post it, just post it. And now I'm seeing that my best friend's grandmother, it has been liking it, and it's very cute. And I also was like, oh, because they're very religious, and so I was like, oh my gosh, they probably are like, we knew she was a very weird child. So I just like that was like, it was so cute and so supportive. But but again, dating is, I think, a little bit easier. I think love is for everyone is different, but for me personally, dating love feels a little bit easier. Like general life coaching, much easier. The sexual empowerment piece is like, whew, this is you're here, you are, you know what I mean, like here you are,
Super edgy.
super edgy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, super edgy.
Mm. Well, considering that, is there a tarot archetype that you would be interested in inviting in more into your work so that maybe those edges feel less sharp?
Ooh, I like that. Of course, I'll obviously say Empress because duh, because of course, I feel like, why not? But also the star because we all grapple with like play, where we are throughout the day. And I do try to come into my body as much as I can. I do try to be in my highest self. I do try to, make decisions from a good mindset, et cetera, et cetera. But obviously, we're human and we go back and we slip back. And so I think who I really would want to play to, especially through this conversation, is actually invite the star more. Cause I feel like she's in my brain, and, like I feel like she's there, and I can kind of see her across the way, but I think she's like, especially through this, apparently she wants to be played with more. She's like, "Hi, we're gonna play more. I want you to invite me in more." So there's something, I know that might be a boring response, but I think there's something, she wants more attention, it seems.
I love that. I think all of these archetypes can be, you can dive into them over and over and over again and uncover new layers of them as you go further. And I also got the flash of the King of Swords for you, that archetype would be super supportive in like having those energetic boundaries so that you can really step out there but feel safe and contained at the same time.
I love that. That's so good. And that's a sidebar with this work. If anyone ever wants to go on the journey, it's like, especially with the sexual empowerment, you can't go from 0 to 60.
Right.
That feels so unsafe. So that's why the card that's like a beautiful suggestion, because it's like, yes, I want to, step into my pleasure. Yes, I want to feel more and come alive, but we don't want to do that in one session. So I love what you just suggested. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, yes, and let's also have our boundaries up with ourselves. Maybe our body doesn't want to do an exercise. Maybe our mind is not up for it today. So I'm like obsessed with that suggestion for me, and also for the listeners that may want to embark on this journey. It's like, it's a slow burn, and that feels like it can be a slow burn, because it's like, I got my boundaries up, I'm open to healing, I'm open to integrating, but it has to be in a way that feels safe and nurturing.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you dropped that too, having boundaries with ourselves as well. Because
Yes.
I know for myself on my healing journey, I'm one of those people that likes to shatter and like cross my edge, but then I got to like pick all the pieces back up, and sometimes my partner is a little less happy that I'm doing that in my life.
That's amazing.
So it's really great advice to hear that it's not just boundaries from the outside, but from the inside as well, so that you can move slow and steady without having maybe your whole life fall apart every time you step into this work.
Absolutely. That is, I think that's key. That's key because sometimes your brain might be like, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. And your body might be like, excuse me, or even like I do so many embodiment exercises. Some of them I teach, some of them I don't, but pretend like a jade egg practice. If you don't ask your body that's violating to just be like, I'm going to do a jade egg practice, or I'm going to do like, oh my God, like, so there needs to be a conversation with yourself. Like, hey, do you feel safe enough to do an exercise, even a movement class? Do you feel safe? Do you feel good? Good. Okay, let's do it. Or if the body is like, no, okay, great. I'm going to honor that too. So I think, like you said, we talk so much in this community, or really all everywhere now, about boundaries, which I'm like, thank God. I'm so glad we're talking about it. Like, hallelujah, hallelujah, thank God. And I think we need to continue the dialogue. Like, yes, 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 yes. And with ourselves, we can't just go from zero to, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it for quote unquote healing and growth. It's like, yes, that can still happen, but like, let's get the body and ask ourselves, like, hey, does this feel good? Or how do you feel? Like, get ourselves more on board.
Yeah, I'm hearing you say really just inviting in this culture of consent on every level of
Hmm.
our lives, inside, with a partner, with our colleagues and friends, just always first tuning into the truth that's coming from inside of ourselves.
100%. Yeah. It's so good. We forget though, so it's like a good remind, like we forget, we just go, and that's part of the autopilot thing. Like, gotta go to the next, go to the next, go to the next, go to the next. So it's like, hold up, like, let me tap back in. And yeah, I think you hit it beautifully.
Gosh, where do you think autopilot begins in most people's lives? Because
Oh,
that
that's so good.
that seems like such a thread with my clientele.
That's such a good question. I wonder, how do I say this? I wonder, I think not for everyone, but I think it definitely happens sometimes with trauma.
Yeah,
I think that's, we can't say for everyone, but I think sometimes when a big trauma happens, it's a pattern interruption.
right, right.
And I think, if there isn't trauma, but we all kind of have, some wave of trauma, I think it's quote unquote growing up, and that messaging of growing up. And, I think that in itself could be pretty traumatic. And from there, it's like, oh, we get the messaging. It's not safe to play. It's not safe to be to be alive and here and present. I think we get that messaging kind of stuffed down our throats a little bit.
It's so sad.
It is. I'm like, I feel so bad for us, but we're unlearning it. We're unlearning it, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, gosh, Erica, this has been such a wonderful and juicy conversation. Could you share with the listeners how they might find you and work with you and all the things?
Yes, I'm obsessed. I know. I'm like, I could talk to you for hours. It's so fun. I'm like, this is great. So you can reach me on my website, or you could read more about my work on my website, which is www.wethelight.org. I'm on Facebook, Instagram the most, so I would suggest that. And that's at We the Light _ LLC. And I also, it's what we talked about. This is big stuff. So I understand if you might not feel like I'm ready to jump into a 6 month, coaching container with this human. So what I do is I do have a free book. It's a free quick ebook. It's about pleasure. And the book is From Perfectionist to Pleasure Expert. And this book, some tips and tools where people can, learn about the five senses and learn some tools that feel safe that they can slowly start to integrate. And again, you can get that on my Instagram, which is at WeTheLight _ LLC, or my website, www.wethelight.org. Or if you're like, you know what, I want to talk to you. Maybe I don't want to sign up. I'm here just to talk to people. We could digest what we were talking about on this call. We can see, where you are on the pleasure journey. Where are you, where you are on the self-love journey. And if you want to talk about working together, I'm open to that. And that's a free 60-minute session. And you can book that online on my website. So there's lots of ways to grab me, and you could watch some stuff on Instagram, to slowly, a slow burn, a slow flirt, or the eat free ebook. Or like I said, if you're like, I want to talk to this person, I'm happy to schedule a free 60-minute consultation, and that's all done on my website. So thank you for
That is
giving me that.
so, so generous. That's so
Yeah.
kind of you to share that space. And I'm feeling the truth of the slow burn with you. That's like your tagline. You're willing to give people this time because people need the time to warm up, just like women do in sex. We really need some time to get
Yep.
juicy and turned on before we can really blossom.
Yes. And some people are like, sign me up. Here's my credit card. I'm like, oh my gosh. And some people are like, I'm going to follow you for 3 months, or
Yep.
I'm going to read the book. I have so many people that download the book, and then 6 months later, they're like, oh, I want to work with you. Cause we need, this is not la-di-da easy stuff. People need to take the time and integrate and say, can I trust this person? So yeah, I want to give options where they could jump right in, or if they're like, I want to, dabble a little bit, that's an option too.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you so, so much for the work that you're doing for the collective. We truly need to be in our pleasure at this time.
Thank you. And thank you for your work. You're an amazing human. I'm so grateful to know you.
Oh, thank you, Erica. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today.